This is a diagram that is representational. There's not actually like an orb out there that we're in called the world of appearance. And there's not a big orb up there called the world of forms. So this is diagrammatic, because none of this is physical, right? This is all immaterial. It exists, but you can't go out and touch it. And there's really two scales imposed here. There's being, this stuff is. And down here we've got non-being, or nothing. This stuff really is not. How is it not? Well, matter, physical stuff, is formless. That is, it has no form. It's just stuff. That's really what the word means in Greek, hule. It's just junk. But we're made out of stuff. So how are we nothing? Because we are echoes, and everything down here is an echo of the real stuff up here, just imposed onto this physical stuff called matter. This is a theme in Greek thought, starting with Plato. Aristotle has a different take on it, but the basic takeaway is the same. Matter is nothing. It doesn't. Sure, it's out in the world, but physical stuff isn't real. This stuff's really real. Now, to think about it, now if that sounds weird to you, think about colloquially. We talk about this. Who are you as a person? Are you your physical appearance, or are who you are on the inside? What's more real? I mean, your body will take up space in a coffin, perhaps. Is that you? So if you're going, no, that's not. I'm who I am on the inside. Like in science fiction and in some Disney movies, people like swap bodies. Okay, but no, I'm really me. I'm my consciousness. Well, what that says there, if you are your mind, your consciousness, then the immaterial part of you is the real you. Right? You're not your body. You're something else. Now, of course, Plato's into that too. You have a soul on the inside. That's the real you. You're not your body. You're you. Kind of, at least analogously, that's similar here. That the non-physical is more real than the physical. Okay. This is also why, for example, in the New Testament, in the book of Acts, chapter 17, Paul is in Athens, going, Greeks, let me tell you about Jesus. Go ahead. And there's actually some Greek philosophers there that we haven't talked about yet. Stoics and Epicureans, it mentions by name. And he says, guess what? Jesus Christ, he's the Savior, all that stuff, evangelizing. But he gets to, apparently Paul says something where they're like, no, you're saying stuff that's weird stuff to our ears, because what's the Christian take? God did what? Who was Jesus? According to Christians, he was God. But God in what? Yeah, human form. He took on flesh and dwelt among us in a physical body. God doesn't do that. That's the Greek response. This stuff isn't real. This stuff is bad. God would not come down into a body. That's silly talk. Okay, for the same, and it's from that Greek perspective is why they have that response. It's like God wouldn't do that. It's like God getting dirty. This stuff's nasty. Think of it that way. The body is nasty. It's decrepit. It smells sometimes. It causes us to desire things that really take us off the more important things. Again, we get hungry, we get thirsty, we get horny. But those distract you from really the more important things, like learning about this, or relearning about this, yes?
So are we living in theoretically, I guess, are we living in one of them, or are we living in between?
Yes. Which is to say, all right, yeah, I understand. I know you made an either-or question. But really, think of it like this. Your soul, your psyche, who you are, is from here, and it's still connected or tethered up to here, but it's been pulled down in here and is trapped in your body. Yeah, you're in a prison. So your body is a prison for your soul that's trying to escape. Again, you might think, why not just kill yourself and go back then? Because then if you did that, it'll happen again. Okay, so you try and learn as much as possible to remember the forms. And as we do that, we gain wisdom. All right, maybe that'll help us the next time we come back, because it might happen. So this is the setup, and sometimes he gives more or less detailed versions of this. For example, in his late stuff, the Timaeus, he says that there's actually this being out here called the Demiurgos, the demiurge, which is kind of like it's not a god in the sense of Zeus, but it's like a powerful being that's kind of inept. And it looks at the forms and how it's like, forms pretty, and then decides to take the matter and copy them. All right, there's the form of whatever, the form of a horse. And so it copies it in the matter, and now we have horses here on Earth. That's a myth that he says in the Timaeus. Again, I don't know if he's saying that this is what actually happened or this is just a story that he's putting out there. But he describes this demiurge looking at the forms going, ooh, form's pretty. That's how the physical world came into being. Now, later there'll be other groups like the Gnostics who take this and run with it. Okay, we'll get to them later. This is at least the setup. There's forms, and everything down here is an echo of that. I don't mean an echo in terms of sound. But like this table here, there's a table up there. And everything down here is a echo of that. Every table in the universe is an echo of that. Well, but all the tables in the universe look different. Well, they're not perfect copies. Every single one is a little bit different.
So this is where it falls into like the one idea where you learn everything up in the world of form.
Yeah, when your soul's originally from here. Before you were born, you were here. And when you were born, whoop, now you're down here. You're still from here. And what you do is when you learn something, you're like, ha, table. You're actually remembering the form of a table from up here. Because you don't learn anything, you remember everything. Nothing is learned, everything is remembered. And that's called anamnesis. That's that learning is remembering. Which is why Plato's going to say, we'll see, I'm going to jump around a bit in some texts. Plato says in the Mino, for example, that's why you can come to a math problem you've never done before and do it. Because the principles that you rely on are eternally up here. Okay, you can see a triangle you've never seen before and bisect it. Well, how, if you've never seen it before? This particular instance. Because the principles up here are eternal. And this stuff this world never began. It's always been there. Never came into being, never started, always there. This started at some point. And so all of us, if we're human beings, there's actually a perfect human being up here. And we're all echoes of that. And we can recognize that. And this is why we can do some things we can do intuitively. Like if you see someone with a leg missing, and then you can be like, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that person, but Plato would say we could tell that something's off in their physical appearance. Like we could know that because we have a form. It's not in our mind. I know sometimes I point, the forms for Plato are up there. The words we even use here for the forms are things like ideal and essential. If you know the essence, let's use the adjective. If you know the essence of something, that means you know its form. What is something in essence? That's the form. Forms are essences. In fact, that's going to be the Latin word for it. Essentia in Latin. Ousia in Greek. This is a painting. Anybody seen this before? It's a fresco called the School of Athens. But who do we have in this picture? And you can actually go online and look this up and see who's who. In the center, under the arch, who are these two? But interestingly, like this is a painting by Raphael, but there's another Ninja Turtle that made its way into this painting too. Yes, Leonardo. Because Raphael, this is Plato, but it's Leonardo da Vinci as Plato. Look at that face. If you look at Leonardo da Vinci's self-portrait, it's the same face, but it's Raphael painting it here. So really, in this painting, Leonardo da Vinci is Plato. And that's supposed to be Aristotle on the right. I don't think it's starring anybody there. Now this painting was made in the Renaissance. So we're almost 2,000 years after Plato and Aristotle lived. Look at their gestures. What's Plato doing? This is the universal sign for Platonism. Why is he pointing up? World of forms. That's where truth and reality is. Notice he's barefoot. He could float up there at any moment. Whereas, look at Aristotle. Aristotle is shod. He's got shoes on. And also look at his hands. No. He's pointing downward, like, this is the real world of Plato. So I love that this illustrates this. Each got one of their books in their hand. Again, Plato. This is where truth is. It's here. Let's get back. And you'll notice if you actually look at that painting, The Death of Socrates from the other day. It depicts the end of the Phaedo. There he is taking the hemlock. What's Socrates doing? Now, was he a fan of the forms? No, it's Plato. This is Plato's Socrates being depicted. But again, most of the Phaedo is a Platonic work. We got to get back to this. The body is the prison. But I point this out with them pointing upwards, because that's the theme of Plato's thought. Reality is here. Let's get back to this, and let's remember. And so what this is used to do is to explain how Parmenides and Heraclitus are both correct. So what did Parmenides say? Nothing changes. What did Heraclitus say? Everything changes. What does Plato say? You're both right. There is a place where everything is permanent. That's rule of form. You're right. That's why I think like humanity is an essence. It's real. We can talk about it. It's not down here, though. It's ideally elsewhere. There is an ideal human being. Are you going to find it down here? No, because it doesn't exist down here. Everything down here is an imprinted copy. A duplicate in matter. Matter isn't real. Heraclitus, on the other hand, who said everything's in flux and everything's changing, down here everything is changing. So they're both right, just depends on what you're talking about. So this is Plato trying to reconcile this. And down here everything's chaotic because matter is chaotic. Matter is constantly in motion. Ideals do not change. Now, I know sometimes colloquially today we'll talk about something, ideally meaning like the best case scenario. That's not exactly what Plato means here. But there is this notion of ideal meaning best. In fact, the word for forms in Greek is ideion, which is related to both idea and ideal. It comes from the same word. And I don't like calling it ideas, because today when we talk about an idea, who's got it? I do, and it's here. For Plato, it's not really you thinking. It's not that the knowledge is here. Where's the knowledge? There. Now, your soul is the conduit that lets you connect back up to this. Again, I think an analogy here that works is something like, this is like, imagine like a wireless network. It has no, where is a network? You're on the internet. Where is the internet? Can you see it, hear it, smell it, taste it, touch it? No. Does it therefore not exist? It's not physical in that way. It kind of is, and I think analogously this works, where there's something non-physical and we're synced up into it because we have some kind of an outlet that gets us there. Like a SIM card to a cellular network. What's the SIM card here? Your soul. Connects you to the network up here. But because of your body, the signal is terrible. Our body gets in the way and loses the signal. So we don't have that connection.
It's like hitting a wall. It's like hitting a wall.
Yeah, exactly.
Connection to there is like running into a barrier.
Yeah, you ever gone I know we don't have a lot here. You ever gone into a tunnel before? Hello? Or even an elevator? Blocks the signal. That's what your body does. That's why when we're babies, we're complete idiots. We don't know anything. Why? Because the flesh is new. And that's why the more we get acclimated to it, the more we know. Because the better we are at remembering. That's why you can be a wise old sage and remember stuff from being up here. Go ahead.
So where do they think that the world of forms was?
It's
I
not
know it's not like a physical thing, but are they talking about the universe or outside of that?
Well, it's definitely outside the physical universe. But obviously that would mean not a place. And I think this will maybe help. This is the way, because even there's going to be Christian, Jewish, and Islamic Platonists that are going to say, this is basically the mind of God. If that helps you, and the mind of God is not in a place. I know, even here, we're pointing to heaven, right? But if the earth is a sphere, I'm on the other side of the planet, what way would I be pointing to heaven? Yeah. Whoa. So heaven, which way is it? All the ways. So yeah, it can't be, we have to talk about it in a single direction. Yes, the ancient Greeks knew that the earth was spherical. Okay, it's a myth that Columbus somehow figured it out. It's a circle. It didn't happen. We know this because Aristotle's going to tell us this. He's going to be we know the earth is round because look at the shadow in a lunar eclipse. Guess what? It's a circle. We're done. Really.
How long did it take to look at?
So, and Aristotle says, I didn't figure this out. Some ancient Greek person did 200 years ago. So that was 2,500 years ago. They're just look at it. We can figure this out. It's not hard. And I can't remember, I want to say...
When the stars also
Yeah, they had, that stuff, they paid attention much better than we did. Because there was nothing else really to do at night, right? Archimedes, that's it. Archimedes. So Archimedes, he was able to figure out this displacement, but he also figured out about the volume of the Earth as well as a mathematical calculation, because maybe Pythagoras was onto something, but he was able to figure that out to a pretty close degree. The volume of the Earth and its roundness, how round it is and how big it is around, just from looking at the horizon. If we measure this and this keeps going on, we can figure out the Earth is a ball. So the idea that in 1492 Columbus was listen, Ferdinand and Isabella, and hear me out. The world's a ball. And they were no, I'll prove it. I'll go to Cuba. That didn't happen. Every educated person knew the earth was round. Back to this. We've got this reality up here. This reconciles the apparent conflict here. Also shows us how we know. And this also, for Plato, is resolving the problem of just saying stuff like the pre-Socratics were doing. It's water. It's air. It's fire. You know what it is? It's this. It's not just whatever we say it is. And this explains how we know. How we can determine what it is. We don't have to just start guessing random things. This explains how we know. It also explains how we're able to acquire knowledge. And how we can recognize something new from apparently a database that we already possess. Again, you can come in contact with something you've never seen before that's similar to something that you've seen, and the way you're able to make the connection, this new thing that I'm experiencing, fits into something that I already know because you already have the knowledge. So, like, for example, if you go outside and you see a tree you've never seen before, it's not a mystery what it is. You know, like, what is this thing? If you've never seen it, you know it's a tree not because you're like, well, I've seen a tree and I saw another tree, because every tree looks different, right? There's none that are identical. There's no twins. They can be highly similar, but there's none that are identical. So if you compare a pine tree to an oak tree, evergreen to a deciduous, they look different. How can you know they're both trees? Go through Hitchcock Woods, you'll see that it'll change depending on where you are. If you're on the eastern side of it, there's a lot of pines. If you're on the western side of it, there's a lot of things like oaks and gum trees. How do I know they're all trees? They look kind of different. The citrus ones had those big leaves that look like you give them high fives. The pine trees have those little needles, but they're both trees. How do I know that? Well, because trees are here, and you have access to this. And you're like, that it matches what's in the database that I have knowledge to. It's a tree. And the more you focus on learning wisdom and remembering, the better you are at making articulate distinctions. That's why you don't look at a dog and go, look at a cat. A child might do that. Right? A child might easily make that kind of a mistake because they're not good at tapping in here because their body, their carnality is new for them. But we, as we get older and wiser, that's no cat. That's a German Shepherd. That's why we can do stuff like that. Okay, was there a comment, question?
It was about kids.
Right, kids are stupid. Why? Because they're new to this. What about senility? You'd think, wouldn't the elderly be the smartest people of all then? No, because their body is failing them. That flesh is getting in the way again. It's not because it's new, but because it's wearing out. Again, it's the body getting in the way. If the body weren't in the way, we would have no problem with this. We'd just be up in the forms, floating around. That's what we're going to do. And again, for the religious traditions that come later that adopt Plato, and not that everybody in those traditions does, but like the Christian Platonists, the Islamic Platonists, the Jewish Platonists, when you die, where do you go? Back into the presence of God. Right there, in that glory. It's great. I'm grossly oversimplifying that. Look at Jewish Platonists, Philo, Christian Platonists, Augustine, sort of. And then an Islamic Platonist would be somebody like Al-Farabi. Some religious views are going to see this as a helpful apparatus because it explains the way we know things. So if I can go there one more time, God had the world, right? And here's the creation down here, and everything down here is part of his creation that he had up in his mind. It wasn't like God was up there going, what am I going to make? The ideas were eternal. And at some point, in the Abrahamic traditions, on a 6-day affair, stuff came into being. It was always there in his head, if you'll permit me that. I'm not saying that God has a cabeza. But it was there, and then the echoes of it came into being at some point. That's how they adopt this, and that helps them explain the scenario. It works. And then when we have the right view of something, what we're doing is our minds are echoing God's thoughts. That's how we know what's right. We're in emulation of God. Plato's not saying that. But others are going to adopt it in that way. That's why I bring it up here. But this explains how we know. Now, it's somewhat mystical. It's rationalistic in the sense that it involves our minds to do this. You don't have a mind, you can't do this. So what has psyche? For Plato, we do. We've got soul. And that's what that soul is it's the real us. It's the substance that remembers. but we have to use it in order to remember. Everybody has this soul, this psyche, but we have to use it in order to remember back. So you can be like, no, I don't remember anything. Expect that person to love food, getting hammered, and having lots of sexual experiences because they don't want to remember. They want to focus on the bodily. Expect that person to be an idiot.
Is that like ignorance, I guess?
Yeah, that would be ignorance. What do they not have? Gnosis, knowledge. Literally what it means, no knowledge, ignorant. From the Greek, because the Greek word for knowledge is gnosis. You pronounce the G, well, gamma. Gnosis, and so what is ignorance? No knowledge. They don't want to get back to this. Ignorant person. I don't want to know. In fact, ignorance is what? Bliss. You do this, you're going to end up like this. Right? Socrates happy here? Actually, he's fine. But when an outsider looking in, is this happiness? Yeah, this is wisdom. Happiness is something else. Is this pleasurable? No, because we already talked, remember Plato's not about that. If you focus on pleasure, that stuff doesn't really matter. Goodness matters. Is this an easy road? No. There's this part in the Phaedo as well where they talk about it and they go like, yeah, can you believe those people that are all into physical stuff? Ugh, the idiots. That's not philosophy. So in fact, I'm going to hop around a couple of places here. In Republic, Book 7, which if you have the textbook is on page 175. Book 7 of the Republic. It's also up online on Blackboard, so if you have access to Blackboard right now, it's up there right now. So the Republic is another dialogue of Plato. In this case, this is one of the it's not like Euthyphro and Apology and Crito in the end of the Phaedo. In that this is Plato doing Plato stuff. It's not just the real life adventures of Socrates. So what he says here, this is a famous illustration where Plato is saying, let me explain what this is like and what philosophy is like. And he says this. And this is at 514a. I'm sure you can Google this too. It might be a different translation, but this is something you can easily Google. I'm looking at, I think this is the Grube translation, but he says this, 514a, very beginning of book 7. Next I said, compare the effect of education, that's doing philosophy, learning stuff, remembering stuff, and of the lack of it on our nature to an experience like this. So he's like imagine this. Story time. Imagine human beings living in an underground cave-like dwelling, with an entrance a long way up which is both open to the light and as wide as the cave itself. They've been there since childhood, fixed in the same place with their necks and legs fettered, that means in shackles. Able to see only in front of them because of their bonds prevent them from turning their heads around. Okay, so imagine people underground in a cave. There is light coming in from behind, from outside, but they're shackled in chairs. So I'm imagining the worst movie theater ever. So they're in there, they're in little seats, they're shackled in such a way, and their heads can't move, so they have to look forward. Also behind them, but on higher ground, there is a path stretching between them, and there's a fire behind them too. So there's the light outside, there's a fire between them. Imagine that along this path, a low wall has been built like the screen in front of puppeteers above which they show their puppets. So I'm imagining it, got it? So people are in the cave, there's the light outside behind them, but that light's pretty dim, but there is light coming from outside. Behind them, there is this fire with a screen in front of it that's functioning as a projector. And not a projector that's showing film, but like shadow puppets, if you will. In front of a fire, if you start doing stuff like this, the shadow will be projected if you have a screen. So the screen will, the shadows will go into it, and the shadows would project across the room. Or in this case, across the little cave. Got it. Then also imagine there are people along the wall carrying all kinds of artifacts that project above it. Statues of people and other animals made out of stone, wood, and every material. And as you'd expect, some of the carriers are talking, some are silent. Great. So they keep moving stuff in front of it. So, again, like shadow puppets. So they have like a little, I like making like little, looking like little signs. All right. So that, they're holding up like a cardboard cutout of a dog. Right? Pop it up there. The shadow is projected. And they go, a dog. And everybody in the shadow, ooh, dog, or whatever it is. Okay. Horse. Oh, look, horse. Is it a dog? Is it a horse? No, it's a shadow on the wall, right? Where is this going? So people are looking at these shadows on the walls. They've been in prison their whole life looking at shadows on the walls going, yep, that's a dog, that's a horse, ooh, tree, whatever it is. And they go on to say, here's some other stuff they could carry along the wall. And what if then their prison also had an echo from the wall facing them? Don't you think they'd believe that the shadows passing in front of them were talking whenever one of the carriers passing along the wall was doing so? They imagine the speaking coming from the front. The dog speaks. Woof. Or what have you. I certainly do. Yeah, I think that. Then the prisoners would in every way believe that the truth is nothing other than the shadows of those artifacts. Trapped in this little reality, people will think the shadows on the wall are real. This is it. The shadow there, that's a dog, that's a tree, that's a horse, that's a person. Remember, they can't look around if there are other people in there. And presumably no one's talking for some reason. We'll assume that everybody's gagged. Okay? Can't speak. Won't speak. They don't. Consider then, says Plato. Well, it's actually the character of the character of Socrates talking here. Consider then what being released from their bonds and cured of their ignorance would naturally be like if something like this came to pass. When one of them was freed and suddenly compelled to stand up, turn his head, walk, and look up toward the light, he'd be pained and dazzled and unable to see the things whose shadows he'd seen before. He'd be overwhelmed by the light. Whoa! What do you think he'd say if he were told that what he'd seen before was inconsequential, but that now, because he's a bit closer to the things that are and turned towards the things that are more, they're more real. He's turned towards them now. He sees more correctly. Or to put it another way, if we pointed to each of those things passing by, asking him what each of them is, and compelled him to answer, don't you think he'd be at a loss? And that he believed that the things he saw earlier were truer than the ones he was now being shown. Yeah, he would think that, much truer. And if someone compelled him to look at the light itself, the sun, outside the cave, by which we see and have knowledge, if someone told him, look at that, wouldn't his eyes hurt? And wouldn't he turn around and flee towards the things that he's able to see, believing that they're really clearer than the ones he's being shown? Now, he's not saying this really happened. There's not like a bunker somewhere where this is happening. But this illustrates what doing philosophy and learning is like. Telling people, guess what? The stuff you know, you don't know. Now, this is kind of what Socrates was doing with you. Oh, you don't know what piety is. Plato's saying, this is what it's like. It's like taking someone who's in prison and has been in prison their entire life, downstairs in the basement looking at the shadow puppets on the wall going, that's real. And then you go, hey buddy, I'm glad we made it here. This is not real. Reality's outside there. Take a look. That's a puppy. Looking up at that's a puppy. No, really, actually, we have some puppies here outside. You can come out here. No, I'm comfortable here. What would it be like? Or you try, and maybe someone gets up and is like, wait, what? They go to the back of the room, they see the things that were being projected up on the wall. This has all been a lie. And then they go outside, they're blinded by the light. Oh, this is reality here. There's a real tree, but I thought this little cardboard thing, not even the cardboard thing itself. I thought the shadow of the cardboard thing was the tree. There's no cardboard here. Okay, don't get lost on the details. That's what it's like, teaching philosophy. For Plato, or doing philosophy. You're showing people, we're here. All of us are in this situation of being shackled. It's getting out. And what we have to do is we have to learn our way out. We have to philosophize our way out to learn what reality is like. And it hurts. When we realize that we're wrong, we don't take it well. Typically. But especially when it comes to matters about the world. And this is why people argue about things. Like, it's this way. And the philosopher's going, you're still in the cave, dude. You're still in the cave. Come out. Where stuff is real out here. We know how to get there. And we get there by way of the light. Now, while the forms are just up there, Plato does sometimes talk about one form as though it's the best of all. Now, there's not a hierarchy up here. Like, there's the form of a horse, and there's physical stuff. That one's easy for us to understand. I think, like, what is a table? It's an echo of a perfect table. What's a horse? It's an echo of a perfect horse. And because matter makes things different, that's why each copy down here is different. But this is also the reason why we know things that are ideal that are not physical things. So yeah, there's forms of physical things up here. But there's also forms of non-physical things that are nevertheless echoed down here, like justice. There is an ideal of justice. And it gets copied down here, and we recognize it when we see it. Oh, this is just. Well, how do we know that? Because we know the form of justice. Piety. Remember that thing that Euthyphro was after? There's even a point where Socrates said there, I don't want to know what the X is pious or Y is pious or Z is pious, but show me the form itself. I think Plato took that and ran with it. He even used the word idea in there. Show me the form itself. What is piety? The piety's up here. And that's why we have a hard time trying to figure it out, remembering. But we know it, but we're kind of tapping into it. It's hard to do because we have to remember. But justice, beauty. How do we know that something's beautiful? The beauty, if you will, the beautiful exists up here. And when it's down here and we see something that's beautiful, it's echoing beauty itself. Now, if you go up here, it's not that you're looking at some physical thing of beauty. Beauty is non-physical. But when it's down here, there's something that's beautiful. It's an echo of beauty itself. Justice itself. Righteousness itself. Goodness itself. Which for Plato is really the highest form. Not there's a hierarchy, but that's the one. Like, that's the one. Tau agathao ide. The form of the good. And like I said, there's no physical hierarchy in here. But if there's one that would be like the best. The form of the good. We really want to know goodness itself. That's the best one. Why is it the best one? That's literally what best means. Right? The superlative form of goodness. We don't say goodest. Best. So that's what we're after. We really want to remember goodness itself. And goodness itself will trickle down into all kinds of other things. It really trickles down into beauty. It trickles down into justice. It even trickles down into our own well-being as humans. And so the word that he uses sometimes, at least in English, is we participate in the forms. That is, we're using them right now. Like right now, where is the form of humanity? It's there. But you're tapping into it, you're tapping into it, we're all using it right now. We're participating in it. Now, if there are forms for gender, some of us are participating in those too. If our hair is a certain color, okay? I'm participating in the form of red-beardedness right now. Some of you are not. But we're tapping into it. Even there's forms for ideas of size, like larger and smaller. Actually, if you read the Euthyphro, Socrates has already talked about that. So like bigness is up here. So is smallness. Each object down here is a thing that's echoing not just one form, but tapping into a bunch at once. So all tables are tapping into table, but if you've got a little coffee table, that's tapping into smallness. If you've got, a Bruce Wayne dining table, that's tapping into largeness. And so we're these little bundles of all these different participations. So think of it that way. Again, the later religious Platonists will talk about this as well. Okay, so in the Greek Christian tradition, the Eastern Christian tradition, I should say, they have this notion of deification or theification, where we're tapping into godness. That's what deification or theification means. We're becoming more like God by participating in God. Which I think one of the epistles of Peter even uses that word. The same Greek word, participate. Obviously, that's the English rendering. But this is the setup, and this is how we know. I'm going to go to a couple more texts here. Let's look at Mino. And in the Mino, Socrates is talking to a guy named Mino. There's this part where he talks about remembering. So here's what happens. Here's how he proves. We can see if it's demonstrably so or not. But Plato says, all right, here's a conversation that didn't really happen between Socrates and Mino. Okay, and this is at 81b. Okay, Socrates is talking and says, about halfway through that paragraph at 81b, they say that the human soul is immortal. The soul is immortal. It lives forever. At times it comes to an end, which they call dying. At times it is reborn, but it is never destroyed. And one must therefore live one's life as piously as possible. Then he references a little jam from a Greek myth. As the soul is immortal, has been born often, and has seen all things here and in the underworld, there is nothing which it has not learned. So it is in no way surprising that it can recollect the things it knew before, both about virtue, there's a form, and other things. As the whole of nature is akin, and the soul has learned everything, nothing prevents a man, after recalling one thing, if he is brave and does not tire of the search. For searching and learning are as a whole recollection. Learning is remembering. I trust that this is true, and I want to inquire along with you into the nature of virtue. So this is just like Euthyphro was about, like, what's piety? This is what's virtue. Tiestin arte. And Mino says, yes, Socrates, but how do you mean that we do not learn? But that which we call learning is recollection. Can you teach me this? And Socrates is like, of course I can't, because remember, learning's remembering. I can't teach you anything. Mino's like, you're right. And so what they do is they pull a random kid over who's a slave in the house, and they start giving him some math problems. That's why, some diagrams here. They'll be like, okay, this kid doesn't know any math. Like, here's a square. Square, you never had a math class? It's square. Now, if it's a square, it's the same on all four sides, all four equal angles, not a rhombus, four equal angles, four equal sides. And we'll just say that, like, this way, it's 2 feet. Obviously, they're not doing imperial measurements in ancient Greece. If it's all the same on all the sides, what's the distance this way? And the kid goes, well, it would be the same, so it's also 2 feet. And what Socrates says here is, this kid's never done math before. How is he inferring this stuff if he doesn't know anything about it? You might say, well, because it's obvious. It's not. He's tapping into something that somehow he knows without being conscious that he knows it. How is stuff like this possible? And there's a lot more to this. All right, where he's like, well, what about this angle? And what about this? That's why, if you look at it here, like this is my mark. There's a big square that's bisected in multiple ways. How long is this side? How long would be this segment? He keeps asking. He goes into more detail, and the kid's just like, well, it's this. Figuring it out, like only because he's bouncing off the questions. This is part of Socratic reasoning. What you want to do is, someone knows the answer, and you just want to bounce it out of them. That's the Socratic method. And Socrates says, 82e, you see, Mino, that I'm not teaching the boy anything, but all I do is question him. And now he thinks he knows the length of the line on which an 8-foot figure is based. Do you agree? He's like, yeah, he does know. And does he know? Like, is it something that he went to school for? When he says, does he know? Certainly not. He thinks it's twice the length. Yeah, so watch him now recollecting things in order, as one must recollect. So he's up like, right here, I just proved to you. But we don't learn in the sense of acquiring new things. We reacquire the knowledge that we have. And then now, I'm going to turn to just with a couple of minutes that remain, the Phaedo. So, and I'm at 64 D and E. I'm talking about death. Because remember, that's what Phaedo's about. Like, this is about to happen. This is the end of the Phaedo, the illustration on the screen right now. So here they're like, before this, like, yeah, so what's death about? What's it like? What's it going to be like for Socrates to die? Do we believe that there is such a thing as death? Uh-huh. Is it anything else than the separation of the soul from the body? Do we believe that death is this, namely that the body comes to be separated by itself apart from the soul, and the soul comes to be separated from the body? Yep, that's what it is. Think about this. Let's see if we can get to a better knowledge here. Do you think that it's the part of a philosopher to be concerned with so-called pleasures, like those of food and drink? Well, by no means. What about pleasures of sex? No way! What of other pleasures concerned with the service of the body? Do you think you should, really care about clothes? I'm summarizing here a little bit. Clothes, ornaments, or do you think they should despise them? Yeah, philosophers should not be into any of that stuff because it's all physical stuff. In the first place, such things show clearly that the philosopher, more than other men, frees the soul from association with the body as much as possible. Yeah, a man who finds no pleasure in such things has no part in them if it is thought by the majority not to deserve to live and be close to death. Uh-huh. A little further down, almost at C. When, then, does the soul grasp the truth? For whenever it attempts to examine anything with the body, it is clearly deceived by it, because our senses are stupid. Uh-huh. Down almost in D. And indeed, the soul reasons best when none of these senses trouble it, neither hearing, nor sight, nor pain, nor pleasure, but when it is most by itself, taking leave of the body, and as far as possible having no contact or association with it in its search for reality. Uh-huh. And it is then that the soul of the philosopher most disdains the body, flees from the soul, and seeks to be itself. 66C. Only the body and its desires cause war, civil discord, and battles, for all wars are due to the desire to acquire wealth. Why is there any discord on planet Earth? Why do we hate each other? Because we have bodies, that's why. Because we want other people's stuff. It could be gold. It could be oil. It could be whatever. We like stuff. We want to, and we'll go out of the way to get it. If we have avarice or greed, it only comes from the fact that we have a body. The soul lacks nothing. And that freedom and separation of the soul from the body is called death. It's freedom. The body confuses. It's a fetter. It's a prison. In fact, in the Phaedo, Plato says clearly that, this is where he uses the language here, the body is the prison of the soul. So that's why he's like, bottoms up! I'm out of here. And I think that's going to close up Plato. If there are lingering questions for Plato, feel free to send them to me in an email or save them for next Tuesday, or some of them might be answered by some people asking questions on Thursday. Let's just say this. Plato has a student, Aristotle. Aristotle says, and this will be a preview for next time, Aristotle says, Plato is dear to me, but dearer still is the truth. So, you were great. You were wrong, but you were great. And so we'll see that with Aristotle next time. So that's what I'll start doing on Thursday. Start talking about Aristotle. It'll probably trickle over into next Tuesday as well. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.